Hello and welcome to another Pivot Music podcast. I'm your host, Barry Landis, and today we are talking to what I think is one of the kindest, most gentle souls who have been in the entire music business, and that is Michael Omartian. Welcome, Michael, to our podcast.
It's an honor to be here, Barry. Thank you. Thank you.
Man, I don't even know where to start. I mean, to tell people, to give people your credits is a little bit overwhelming. I've got about 3 pages worth of artists you've worked with: Christopher Cross, Donna Summer, Robert Palmer, Whitney Houston, Rod Stewart. I mean, the list of legendary artists that you have worked with through the years is quite remarkable. And I guess really my first question to you as, producer, player, writer, I mean, you've served so many capacities in working with all these different people. Was there anybody that was kind of like awe-inspiring when you were working with them over the years? Was there somebody that you had a kind of a gulp kind of moment that you get to work with?
Well, if you're talking about someone's abilities as opposed to their stature just as a celebrity,
sure,
I can say that everybody that you had mentioned was kind of like a gulp moment, because there was a reason why they got to where they got, and
wow,
because they had tremendous ability. So whether it was a Whitney Houston or a Rod Stewart or someone new like a Christopher Cross, the one thing that I noticed with all of them is that they were supremely talented, and that was awe-inspiring to me, and the reason why I was feeling so blessed to be part of those careers. So I would have to say that there wasn't one; it was pretty much all of them, just from the ability standpoint.
Okay, so on the other side, anybody you were surprised to get a call from when the invitation came to work?
Well, you need to know that probably the launching pad was that Christopher Cross first album. So prior to that, I was a staff producer at Warner Brothers. I was new. I had come from a past of playing on sessions, arranging for different people, but the actual act of production came as a result of, well, a recommendation from a couple of people that I work with said, you need to be a producer because you've got those kind of chops. So I ended up with the Warner Brothers A&R staff, which was, boy, I tell you, talk about names. I mean, my gosh, you had Ted Templeman, Lenny Waronker, you had, Russ Titleman, you had Gary Katz. All these people had tremendous credits, Steve Barry, and I was on this staff. So for me, the launching point for anything that happened of significance was, and I mean that not in a harsh way, but a significance as far as the follow-up, was the Christopher Cross first album, which launched me into another level. And then I started getting calls from Rod Stewart, Donna Summer, all these different people. And so prior to that, it was like I was just a session player and arranger, and then that's what really took off. So I credit Chris and that album that we did that had Sailing and Ride Like the Wind and all those records on there. That was the beginning of some significant stuff that happened afterwards.
And was that his first?
Yes.
Album? That was his first album.
That was his first album. And what happened was I was new on the staff of Warner Brothers. And so I was like the newest kid. So we'd have Wednesday morning A&R meetings, and people would send their cassettes at the time, of course, because we're talking the 70s. And evidently Chris had been sending these cassettes regularly, and this was the first time I heard him.
Was he signed at the point? He was signed or not? No,
he was not signed. And he would send his demos, and I'm sitting there and I'm hearing Sailing and Ride Like the Wind on this demo. And I'm looking around the room, and there's 12 guys and ladies in the room. And I'm like noticeably inspired by what I'm hearing, but everybody else is just kind of deadpan, just kind of looking. And I went, does anybody like this? And
I'll take that.
and then they said, well, we hear this all the time because you keep saying it. I said, well, I happen to like what I'm hearing. I'd love to. And Lenny Warnaker, who was the head of A&R, said, well, if you like it, you do it. And that was it. That's all he said. Those 4 words, 5 words or whatever, you like it, you do it. 6 words, right? Anyway, and I said, okay. So then I had a meeting with Chris, and then from that point on, it kind of launched into doing that first record, which took 6 months. It came out, and then they put out Ride Like the Wind, and of course, it was just like, it broke out of Miami. And it was a big deal. The promotion department was blindsided. They didn't know what they had because if you remember around 1979, 1980, Punk, Debbie Harry, Cars, all the punk bands and stuff. And here we come out with this very supremely pop record with horns and strings and all this stuff. And so when there was a little bit of a delay, I said, uh-oh, we're in trouble. They don't believe in this. But when they put out Ride Like the Wind, I got a call from the head of promotion. He said, man, I got to tell you, we just put it out and it went off. It just went. And there was a DJ in Miami who loved the record. He was Hispanic, and he played it for the Hispanic people, and they liked that Western feel to it or whatever. And it took off, and then it just started going across the nation. So that's how it started.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I had my own years. I worked at Warner Brothers. Mo Austin,
wonderful person,
being the
wonderful person,
the guy that created the environment, right? Yeah. I mean, like, you never worried about anything. If Mo was in charge, you could follow your heart, right?
I'm telling you, that was a company that was very different because if you think about it, they would have artists that you would say they weren't commercial successes, but they were pivotal in the creative part of the music business. Ry Cooder, all these different people that never really had, like, here's a #1 record from Ry Cooder or somebody else, Bonnie Raitt. They had all these different people that were kind of, they were there to give credibility to an artistic culture as opposed to we're strictly a company that banks on #1 hit records on the pop charts. And so Mo presided over that attitude, and it made it very comfortable for everybody because you could bring eclectic things in, and he would go, we don't know what the future is for this, but we like it enough that we feel like it should be part of this roster. And you know that because you were there during those years where this was a unique record company, and I felt very blessed to be there because it wasn't like other record companies. The record companies that Clive Davis, Walter Yetnikoff, and some of these others presided over were very profit-based as their bottom line. And it was all about, do we have an artist that can get us pop success or rock success or R&B success? And I felt like Mo was a very different type of a person.
It's funny too, because as I recall, his background was as the accountant for Frank Sinatra. And here's a numbers guy who was giving creatives room to do their thing.
Yeah.
How unusual. I mean, it wasn't unusual then, although it was the greatest place to work.
Yeah.
But today, very, very hard thing for most companies to even think about.
No.
Following your heart and just, let's not worry about the income right now. Let's just work on the music, which is a novel idea, right?
How about that? How about that for an unusual concept?
Here's a business plan for you. But I got to tell you, Mike, I was just on the business side. I wasn't a performer, but literally, hey, don't worry about this quarter. Don't worry about this year. We'll carry you. We'll carry you next year. We'll carry you the year after that. And you start thinking, what? Like, okay, so now just go do what you do. And they believed in you. They believed in you to sort of come up with something. And sure enough, you did. You became you still on staff when you produced the Cross record? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it all came to a Warner Brothers address at the end of the day, right?
And the Rod Stewart thing was a Warner Brothers thing,
Yeah.
Brothers thing. So for a few years there, I was actually exclusive to Warner Brothers, but I had a little bit of an addendum to my contract that said that occasionally they would allow me to do an outside project. And that's when Donna Summer called, because she was with Casablanca or Polydor at the time. And I was able to do that She Works Hard for the Money record with their permission. I couldn't do more than one at a time, but I spent most of my time doing Warner Brothers artists, yes.
And there again, another example. And
Yeah.
Michael, you and I have known each other a long time. We've never talked about the fact that we both worked at Warner's back in those days. But the idea that you would have a salary from a company, and oh, by the way, you could do a little moonlighting, you know, as long as it worked in the schedule and, you know, it didn't upset the apple cart too much one way or the other, you could do those kind of things.
Well, that speaks to Mo Austin. And
it really does.
And Mo was a very different cat, man. He would invite us all the time up to his house up in Bel Air, sitting up. I mean, you've been to that house. That was ridiculous, man. It was
unbelievable.
Like a 360-degree view of the entire city and the ocean. I mean, it was ridiculous. But they'd have barbecues on Saturdays, and you'd go over, and it was like very family oriented. And he wasn't threatened at all. I remember him coming into my office at times. Here I'm this new kid. He'd come into his office, throw his feet on my desk, and just sit and talk, ask about my family, ask about my kids. You know, how's it going? He was interested in, he was kind of like the perfect boss that you'd want to have. He was just perfect. Yeah.
I got pictures. I've got pictures with him and Lenny and all of those guys. So I cherish them.
Oh yeah.
And I'm going to just get out of my little personal fanboy thing here and just tell everybody I listen to the most amazing podcast. Rick Beato. I don't know how many people that are listening know who Rick is, spelled Beato. Look him up on YouTube. He does interviews with a lot of people. But I found Michael's, which you must have just done a month or two ago.
I think I did it in the fall.
Okay.
And it came out 4 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, because it looked like it was just 1 month's worth of views here, but I got the most amazing background on Michael Omartian. And if you want to go back to his keyboard training and coming from Chicago and getting into the LA scene and sitting down in front of charts that nobody had told him he was going to have to play. And then when you had to sit there, I forget the project, but the piano's in the middle of the room and here you are trying to put, chords onto everything.
That was a terrifying couple of days. Yeah.
Amazing story. Check out Rick Beato, Beato on YouTube and listen to the Michael Omartian interview. You will absolutely love it.
Thank you, man.
Michael. Yeah, man. So Michael, I'm going to rewind from that time period. In 74, I was here in Nashville, where we both are now. And I was at Trevecca Nazarene and I was finishing up my bachelor's degree. And it was 1974 and an album came out called White Horse.
Yeah.
And that album completely rocked my world. I grew up in, the church and Christian music and I guess you could say more, the Southern gospel style of men's quartets and all of that. And had heard about a couple things that were going on, but it was the early 70s and we were sheltered at Trevecca. But we are talking, I think, on this podcast largely to a Christian audience.
Okay.
And so part of our themes for today are going to be about that, and I'm intrigued as I absorbed Whitehorse.
Yeah.
I knew that I knew that I knew, and I don't know whether it was my friends telling me or whether it was literally, Jeremiah, Fat City, whatever, that was telling me this guy is a Christian. And so I'm just going to ask you a question I've never known the answer to is, where did you come to faith? When did that happen for you?
I'm 78 now, 78 years old, and I came to faith at 20 years old back in Chicago on Christmas Day. And
Wow.
it was an interesting time because I was in a very, I don't know if I call it a conflicted state, but I realized that what my aspiration was couldn't take place there because there was nothing in that area that would support what I was hoping to do.
You weren't going to be a part of Moody Broadcasting? You didn't think that was going to work?
Well, I mean, it was interesting because I listened to my upbringing was everything from Elvis to Oscar Peterson to Art Tatum, all these different things. And so I had and the Beatles when they first came out. I was older than that. I was a little older than 20 when they came out. But my early influences were not church music, but I was in a conflicted state because I knew that coming from a very ethnic family, it was important to all be together. And I knew that there was a time that was coming where I would not be together. I would have to get on a plane. I would be the only one. Everybody else lived in this area. And I knew that there was pressure on me. I knew it was going to be hard on my family. So I've had a lot of anxiety about that. I didn't know what was going on, but it really, all of that led to my cousin Chuck, my first cousin Chuck, leading me to the Lord on the second floor of my house on Christmas Day. My grandmother, who came out of the genocide of the Armenians back in 1915, who had her husband beheaded and her daughter caught on an end of a spear, was a very spiritual, strong Christian woman. Her faith was increased through that, not diminished through that. And she was downstairs in the living room, and I was upstairs receiving the Lord. And my mom told me that she jumped up off the couch and screamed hallelujah. And everybody was startled. And they said her name was Connie. Her English name was Connie, but it was Kairani was her. And they said, Kairani, what happened? She said, my grandson just received Jesus.
Oh, man.
It was downstairs. She didn't know what was going on. The Lord told her, Jesus. And so it was amazing, man. And so, and so that kind of started. I was 20 years old, 1965. And so that's when I came to faith. And then from that point on, it was really serious because I had her as my role model. I watched her my life. She was a woman of prayer. I knew her background. I knew the choices she could have made out of bitterness. Was no bitterness. There was only forgiveness. So she was really a mentor. I'd go over to Grandma's house, man, and she would cook for me, and we'd just sit and talk, and she would sing, and she'd read her Bible, and it was stunning. And I wasn't a Christian at the time, but afterwards I had a new appreciation, and I had some very, very good counseling and help as far as getting me through the problem that I was going to have, where I was going to have to get on a plane and say goodbye to everybody and move to LA, which happened just a few years later when I realized that what I wanted to do, and this led to, and you're asking about Whitehorse. And so when I came to California, that was 1967. So it was 65 when I came to the Lord. I came to California. I went straight to San Bernardino and kind of joined Campus Crusade for Christ. So I saw the Jesus movement unfold right there in Southern California. I actually, with the movie that came out last year, I was at that bluff at the ocean watching people being baptized below.
Wow.
So that's part of my past. So I witnessed all of that.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Gerard and all the different people that were involved at the time. And so one of the first things I did when I got to LA, much to my mom's heartbreak, because she didn't understand the music part at all. But one of the first things I did was find a church, and it happened to be Church on the Way with Jack Hayford, which I can't imagine a more solid way to have your Christianity nurtured by a man and his wife that were so balanced and so sane and so regular. It was just a wonderful foundation for all of this. But if you want me to keep elaborating on that, to get to the point.
I love all of it, and where I'm take us to the point of how did that album emerge out of you?
Okay,
like,
so
why that then?
Okay, well, one of the early things that happened to me, and I noticed that on the questions that you had for me, was what was a significant moment in your ministry career that happened that you could, and this has a lot to do with it, but I ended up on a session in 1972 through a series of circumstances with Hal Blaine on drums, Joe Osborne on bass, Larry Carlton on guitar, and I was the keyboard player. I was a nobody. These guys were the wrecking crew. They had been around.
Yeah, I went and read the credits again for the album. I'm like, you had a who's who on.
Well, but this was a recording session that kind of launched the entire thing. I ended up in a session with these guys, and the first thing they did was they took me to the Musicians Union. This is now 1972, and they got me signed up, and I became booked solid as a session player the following week because of Joe Osborne and Hal Blaine, which led me into a situation with the head of A&R of ABC Dunhill, which that album was released on ABC Dunhill. A guy named Steve Berry, who to this day I really credit as, man, I tell you what, this guy taught me what it was to know what a hook in a song was.
Wow.
How to identify something that could be a commercial success. So it was just really an interesting time. So through this early days, Steve Berry said, hey, would you ever be interested in doing your own album? And I'm going, why would you even ask me that? You don't know whether I sing or not. I mean, I'm a staff producer at ABC Dunhill. And he said, I think you do a great job at doing your own album. And I don't know if he thought I was going to do an instrumental album or whatever. So they gave me a budget. He says, go in there. And I had met Stormy, my wife. We had married, and she was a great lyricist. So we sat down and I said, okay, they want me to do an album. And she started writing lyrics. She's an author and has done very well as an author. She's a really good writer.
Stormy Omartian, absolutely.
Yeah, my wife. And so we started working on something. And the first thing, I had a Fender Rhodes, a clavinet, and a piano at our house. So I sat down at the clavinet and I started this funky thing, which became Jeremiah, which was the opening track.
Incredible.
And what was interesting about Stormy is that she had a way of writing that I could literally have a lyric first before I wrote a song. Normally you'll lay out a melody and chord changes, and then some lyricist will come in and fill it in. Whereas she would send me something, she would put something in front of me, and I would go, oh, this can spawn a melody. I can hear it right now, and a chord change. So half the album was her lyrics first, half the album was my music first. But we knew, because both of us were kind of young believers and we were being mentored by Jack Hayford, that we were getting these incredible messages. And so a lot of the information that we were getting in our Sunday sermons became the lyrics for that album. And they were a combination of love between a man and a woman, our marriage, a love between God and man, love between Jesus and man. So it was a combination of all these different elements that were being put together, and almost in a little bit of a covert way, because even the title track, White Horse, if you didn't know Revelation, you might go, what is this? Some kind of a, cartoon or whatever, but it was the book of Revelation and the return of Christ. So we did that record. And of course, the president of ABC, Dunhill, was the furthest thing from someone who would understand what Christianity was. And he recognized Jay Lasker, great guy. I really liked him, but he was not a Christian. So he noticed that it sounded spiritual. He said, I don't know what we can do with this. So he called Billy Ray Hearn at the time.
Wow.
I'd never met Billy Ray, and he put me in a meeting with him, and I played this thing, and Billy Ray said, we'd be very interested in taking this album on. So it went from ABC Dunhill and became a Murr project, which was Billy Ray Hearn.
Oh, at Word those years. Here, I'm thinking Billy Ray when he was at Sparrow. You're talking before that, right?
Yeah, it was a Murr release.
Wow.
But I have a whole box of ABC Dunhill original in the cellophane White Horse albums.
Okay, I gotta have at least one. I gotta have one. How about Adam Again? You have any of those?
I don't have Adam Again, but I do have, because Adam Again was automatically on Murr. The White Horse was the ABC Dunhill.
Okay.
And those are the ones that I have. So.
Okay, I owe you lunch. I'm gonna take care of that for you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Back to our audience, Michael. What intrigues me in all of this is, the way you have constantly sort of reinvented yourself. And not that you need that, but it seems like there's sort of a desire to keep exploring things on your part, coming from your sort of jazz, while you weren't so much a jazz player, but your love of the jazz genre probably gave you sort of more of an open mind to try things differently, right? So here you are doing a Donna Summer record, you're doing your own records, you're producing for people, you got the Grammy for the album of the year with Christopher Cross, and you at some point after that, I can't remember the year, but you decide you're going to Nashville.
Yeah. 1993.
It was 93. Okay. So by 93, you're moving to Nashville and you're working with every Christian artist there is, because they all want to have Michael Omartian. What was getting into you then? Were you wanting to help people? Was the music intriguing? Did you feel like it needed maybe a little bit of a infusion of ideas that you might be able to bring? I mean, I know you worked on a lot of albums that I was a part of distributing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, one of the reasons why I left LA is when you have a guy like Jeff Porcaro programming drums as opposed to playing drums, you got a problem. You got a problem when nobody's interested in a bass player; they're interested only in keyboard bass. And so, from my background, where I'd be in a room with musicians, and you'd feel the synergy between people, and you didn't have to explain every bar, you didn't have to program bars, you didn't have to do all that kind of stuff. You'd say, "Here's a chart," and then you'd watch something happen. That was going away rapidly in LA. It was leaving quick. And so, and also at the same time, Barry, I was getting calls from Amy Grant's people and different people that were working here in Nashville. And my engineer and I would fly out regularly around between 89 and 93. We would come out maybe 4 or 5 times a year for a week and, produce and do stuff like that with Gary Chapman and Amy and all that kind of stuff. And so even though Stormy never came out, I'm witnessing this thing here that still is maintaining going into the studio with a rhythm section and playing live music with people.
And that music was still doing it in those days, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it would be anything from country to Christian, all that kind of stuff. The way you achieved a track was like we did back in the 70s. Mm-hmm. Early 80s in LA, which was you had a drummer, bass player, maybe a couple guitar players, a keyboard player. And that was very important to me because it was a system that I was brought up in. And I realized that there would have to be a little bit of bending on my part because the things had changed. So I learned the whole computer thing. I had digital perform and all that stuff, but I hated using that stuff. I still love that. So part of what you're asking me is, yes, in a way, I was never satisfied doing one type of thing. And I also enjoyed the gifts that other people had. And if it happened to be R&B, I loved R&B enough and I understood R&B enough to know that I would be okay working with them on that. Or if it was pop, or if it was country, I was familiar enough with these various genres, and I never wanted to be pigeonholed as he only does this one thing. Though I have to say that if you think about it, oh, he's the ballad producer. You know, he did the Glory of Love, and you know, How Am I Supposed to Live It? Which I kind of go, oh, I'd like to be known for more than that, but it's just the way it is. That's the way you're remembered. So,
well, yeah, but in the Christian space, it wasn't so much a musical style, was it? You had a little bit of room there.
Well, I think also what was kind of cool, because you said yourself that you were brought up in more of a gospel, Southern gospel thing. Well, Southern gospel was kind of the prevailing Christian music for many, many, many years. And
Right.
what did two Imperials records, which was one was in
Oh, yeah.
in 1980, I remember how controversial some of that stuff was, because it was like, how dare you do that to a Southern gospel band? But then eventually people got it and they went, well, I kind of like the change of what I'm hearing. And it's not that I feel like I'm at all responsible for any change, but I embraced that change, and it became something where I'm noticing that like groups like For Him and Point of Grace and all these other artists, you know what? They're really talented. These aren't just people that are deferring to Christian music because they don't have anything else to do.
Right.
These people are legitimate artists. They really know what they're doing. And I wasn't going to judge them, obviously, on that. I mean, it's the whole package. You believe in Jesus, so do I. And also, my goodness, you can really play. Wayne Watson, I told Wayne Watson many years ago, I said, Wayne, if you had decided back in the 80s to become a pop artist, I said, I am convinced with your voice that you would have had secular hits one after another, because you have a voice that I go, wow, there it is. And he chose, no, I want to serve the Lord with my music. And I respected him so much for that. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So alongside of that, I crossed paths again with you a little bit after that with a film soundtrack you did.
Yeah.
And you've done many. Prince of Egypt and many other projects you've been a part of in Hollywood, but this was sort of a straight up, you might even call it the early days of faith-based filmmaking, which was 14 years ago now. I can't believe that.
Yeah.
But here we are now this year. Let's go to last year, 2023. Our marketplace released 45 faith-based movies, and it's growing. And right now, I added up the numbers. It's bigger than the Christian music industry is. It's growing so much, and it hasn't even scratched the surface. So I feel like we're now in almost the Jesus revolution of the film side of this.
Yeah.
You scored that movie, you composed that movie, Last Ounce of Courage. And I remember at that time you saying, hey, let me know if you got any others that are like that coming along. I'd like to do more of that. So for those that are listening who are right now looking for a composer, I want to let them know that you actually would be up for working on another movie, right?
I really enjoy that aspect of it, because it's another type of thing. You really play a secondary role in what's going on, whereas when you're doing the music for a record, that's it. It's an audio experience, and that's where it lies. I enjoy looking at a scene and saying, how can I fortify what's going on to add to the emotional content of what's happening. Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's time consuming and it's very difficult, and you're usually the last piece of the puzzle. Each one that I've ever done was, okay, we'll have something for you in 4 weeks, and 8 months
And
later.
we're releasing in 5 weeks.
Yeah. 8 months later, well, we're ready, and you've got 2 weeks to do it. You go, what? I mean, what? But I mean, there's a challenge to it, and I'm set up here to do this, and I really do enjoy it. I mean, I did 4 or 5 of them, a couple documentaries and a couple of feature films, and they were all small budget films, and that's fine. But I agree with you. There is a movement that's happening right now that I think that if you stack where the secular film industry is, I think it's very confused from so many.
Wow.
Is so confused, especially when it comes to the gender side of things. We need to take something that was a male role and now all of a sudden it has to be a female.
Amen.
And I'm thinking, you know what, just come up with another story that features the female role. Don't take an old story and say, well, in order to pacify some people who are agitated by the fact that it's a guy playing a role, and then you change everything. And I'm going, well, this is what's contributed to the rather meager profits that have happened in the last few years. And of course, without the eyes of Christ, you don't identify what's really going on. So you keep pushing the same thing, and you realize we're continuing to lose. Well, while they're continuing to lose, people who have a vision for something that brings you joy, that's a great story that moves you, and it's with some normal people, and it's a wonderful story, and they go, well, how come that's successful? Because it reaches people in their basic thing. It doesn't push them into, I have to change everything I've always believed in order to be able to enjoy this. I can enjoy this because this is how I've always believed. Do you know what I'm saying?
I love it. I love it. And you just said it so beautifully. We don't have to change the classics. We need to write new ones that are made for the proper audiences.
Thank you. And I think it's a cheap out. And I think that the secular movie industry was in a little bit of trouble when they started taking these superhero movies and just constantly, here's part 3, part 4, part 5, part 6. And I the last one I went to, I sat there and I tell you what, I almost had a nervous breakdown. The action was so ridiculous. I'm going, what are you doing to our kids, man? You're just amping them up to the point where they're like nervous wrecks, because it's like there's not enough action. It's like crazy. And I thought, where's the great stories? Where's the story? Godfathers aren't being made anymore. And if it's nothing but violence, it's not a whole story. Jeremiah Johnson. There's so many great movies, the old Clint Eastwood movies. I like to go to old Clint Eastwood movies. Yeah, they're kind of comical because they're kind of caricatures of the West. But there's a reason why classic rock, there's a reason why classic movies, they're reaching young people who are going, I'm not even interested in what's coming out today. I like that old stuff because it reaches a certain part of your soul. It's a quieter part of your soul,
Michael, I have 30 questions. I've gotten to 2 of them, and I'm going to have to do a part 2. Beato's doing a part 2 with you. I got to do one.
That's fine. Because I'm noticing all these and I'm thinking it's not possible to do all this.
We're not going to do all this, but let me just go to a couple of key ones.
You got it.
I admire Stormy so much.
Yeah.
You guys have been a Hollywood couple now 45 years?
51.
51. Me too. 73?
Yeah.
That was mine. Anniversary. Yeah, bud.
Congratulations, man.
And to you. I didn't know it was as many for you.
Yeah, last 50. Yeah.
So how do you maintain the balance in your relationship? How do you keep the home balanced? I know your son, Chris. I know you've got a great family.
Yeah.
You guys still do dinners together all the time. And I just know some of what goes on there. But, and how, maybe the question is, how did Stormy navigate all this? I mean, it certainly wasn't easy at times.
Well, we had a thing that we talked about early on, because I knew that she was a talented writer and she was going to need space to be able to do her books. And so we kind of had a thing that I said, okay, babe, what do you need? She said, I need a couple weeks. I said, okay, I won't do anything for a couple weeks. I'll just take care of the kids. I'll do whatever needs to be done for the kids for a couple weeks. You do your couple weeks, and then I'll go back to what I did. The thing is that she could do everything that she needed to do at home. I couldn't, right?
Right.
But even though she was at home and writing, actually a couple times I sent her to Florida and said, go to Florida, go right on the ocean, get a condo, stay there for 2 weeks. I'll take care of this. And she would get tons of work done by just doing that. Sometimes she would take our daughter so that my daughter could enjoy the beach, and she could just, go to the grocery store if she needed to or whatever. But that we always had this understanding early on where we talked about, in order for this to practically work, I'm going to have to let someone know, an artist know that, listen, I need the next couple weeks. Can we just take a break? And I never got no. I never got a no. So it worked very well. But I tell you what, Barry, the other thing is that, and I don't want this to sound wrong, but my brother-in-law told me a long time ago, I'll never forget it. I called him. I really loved him. He's a surgeon. And I said, Leon, I'm having a hard time. I said, I'm working with an artist that I'm having a really hard time conveying certain ideas. And it seems like they don't want to do or try. And he said, Michael, think of this. He says, I want you to learn this. He said, never fall in love with your own ideas. And I went, wow, boom, there it was. And from that moment on, I said, I don't care. If the artist doesn't like what I'm not even going to argue. We'll try that. A lot of times we'd spin all the way around back to what my idea was, but it was just an attitude and a way of approaching something that was, and I know other people are not like that, but I made it my business to listen very intently to what the artist wanted. And that also went with our relationship between Stormy and I. We had gotten to a place where there was, every marriage has conflicts. Let's be honest. There are times when you go to battle and stuff like that, but you learn from it. And one is that, you know what? I don't always have to be right, and she doesn't always have to be right. And we've recognized that, and we just go, okay, no big deal. We don't do this or we do this. It's not a big deal. And so it's peaceful because of it.
Can I get personal? Did you ever have counseling?
Not really. Not really. You mean between the
marriage? Just anybody ever step in and help you guys through any times?
We had small groups. We had small groups at church. We hosted small groups, and we were really able. Prayer was a big deal for us.
Wow.
So that when we would have a conflict, and it seemed unrealizable or resolvable, we would just at some point during the day, because we were going at it, we said, can we just stop for a second and let's just pray? And it was no big deal after you were done praying. So I don't want to sound hyper spiritual, but sometimes there's nothing someone can say. There's no advice that someone can give. You just have to let go and just put it in God's hands and go, I'm done carrying this. And she would say, I'm done carrying this. And then we move on. And now we get to a point where, if we irritate each other, which happens once in a while, within an hour, we're back to where we were without even having to resolve anything. It's
That's
just
so amazing.
Well, after all these years, and you can't put a price on just the number of years that you've learned and learned and learned and learned. And the problem is a lot of people give up way too early and they don't get to this point. And it's really a shame.
Yeah, since we're in the 51 club, I would say on my side, I got to a point where I thought, wait, I want to make a change here, and then I'm going to start all over again with somebody else. I don't think I want to go through that.
No, absolutely not. And some things, we just had something happen the other night, and my wife made a comment that normally was I call it the comment. She makes a comment and doesn't realize that it triggers something in me. And I've had to just get to the point where I go, she doesn't mean what she just said. Understand that and move on. I don't have to say, you did it again. I just know that let it go. And it's very benign. It's not, but it sparked something because it was something that kind of happened in my childhood that my mom would say. And it had smacked of that kind of thing, a bit of a condescending vibe. But I know that Stormy didn't mean it that way, but that's how I took it. But I go, you know what? Let it go.
Brother, I have the exact same trigger, and we've talked about it, and we've had to pull it out. And I will have to identify it, and then it gives her a whole new place to deal with me. And you're exactly right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly right. 2 quick questions, and we're going to be done here. Is there an artist that you haven't worked with?
Oh, man.
That if you could say, you know what, it'd be fun to be in the studio with that artist.
Well, first of all, any living Beatle would be it for me. Peter Gabriel is one of my favorite all time.
Wow.
I love it, and I love Sting all time. If I think about a few people that I would it wouldn't have to be, I just love to be in a room and can we just see if we can co-write something? I want to hear how you come up with the first idea. I just want to hear that, what you're thinking, because they go so deep into something and it's so inspiring. I mean, I would think that if honestly, I did a thing with John Lennon when he was not in very good shape. He was in terrible shape, but I always loved John Lennon and I always prayed for him. And I heard that he came to the Lord before he died. So that made me happy. But John Lennon was a guy that I'd go, when I heard the song Julia and those first 4 chords, I went, dude, do you know those first 4 chords that you played? And some of the stuff he did, I go, man, I would love to just sit in a room and write something with you, or just be in a room and produce something with you. He made a comment. He said that his favorite production of all time was Sailing. And I went, whoa. I heard that from, Christopher Cross he said that in an interview. My favorite production of all time was the song Sailing. And I'm going, really? And that blew me away. But those are I would say, there's probably other people too. Joni Mitchell, I would have loved to just hear the first 8 bars of something that she was fashioning, because it was so unconventional the way she did things. It would be such an honor to just sit there and say, can we collaborate, or could I produce something on you? That would be amazing.
So the last question is, what would you hope your musical legacy to be? But maybe let's just say your legacy. What is it you hope you're leaving with the world, with the industry, with people in generally?
Well, I tell you, it'd be much less music, and it'd be just much less. It'd be much more how people viewed me as a person, and I think what really blew me away, and I was so humbled by, was when Beato did that interview. I read there were 4,000 plus comments, and I was just so humbled by what people were saying, and it touches me. That sorry.
That's all right, man. Take a second. It's all good.
But the comments were equally about the feelings they got from what seemed to be a normal, humble human being that had this incredible career. And that's kind of the fact that my humility comes from my love of Jesus and his lordship in my life. And I never felt there was ever a reason to feel haughty or overconfident about anything, because I didn't report to me. I reported to the Lord.
Yeah. Wow. Michael, to say it's an honor to talk to you is understatement. I
appreciate it.
I am just sort of overwhelmed with the life that you've been able to live, the people that you've been able to touch. And I know whoever you work with, you're always trying to let them see Jesus in you in everything that you do. So it's an honor to be with you, friend. And we're gonna go to lunch, and I'm gonna get that White Horse album from you. Okay.
I'm gonna do that, and I'd love to continue this at another time too. If you want to keep going on this, I'd be honored.
We will do it. Thank you again, Michael Omartian. Everybody that's listening, if you want more interviews like this, please reach out to our pivotmusic.us to subscribe, and you'll be able to catch the second part of this interview when we release it. So thanks again, Michael, for being with us.
Thank you so much, man. God bless you.